Hey guys, Thrasher here. It's May 1st and that means it's time for a new tier list. Let's talk about it right now. Okay, so before we get into the tier list, I do want to mention that the list of characters that we're getting is starting to get very large and unruly, so I may have to change the format of how we do this going forward. In this current tier list, though, the format is going to stay the same. You're going to see the standard tiers that you see, the D, C, B, A, S, and then S plus and Z tier. We do have all the Z tier characters split out one by one. We will be explaining each of those in order from the least powerful to most powerful. All the characters in their specific tiers, just like normal, are just arbitrarily placed within the tier. They're considered close enough in power level that it doesn't really matter how you place them, and it's going to more matter the teams that they go on rather than that specific character. So any character in the C tier should be close to about as useful or as powerful or as relevant as any other character in the C tier. With that being said, let's jump into the tier list itself and start with the D tier. So what you're going to notice here is the D tier hasn't really changed at all from last month because we haven't got any balance changes. None of those characters have moved up, and most of the characters in the C tier are going to stay better than the D tier characters. The only reason you really see characters move up a tier when there are no balance changes is because you have some other character that fits on their team for whatever reason that just makes them considerably better. And you'll notice that about the female warriors team when we get to that point. We'll talk about that. But as I said before, the D tier characters, same as before, these are the garbage characters. They're on deck for balance changes. Do not put these characters on any team if you're trying to be serious. If you're trying to make a for fun team, there are a couple characters in the D tier that are usable. One good example is Hercule. He's really the only character in the game that brings a special move as a card if you want to do that, but he is not a character that you would bring on a serious team as of right now. So let's move into the C tier. Okay, so the C tier, these are characters that are also pretty close to garbage characters. They're only characters that you would use in a very, very specific situation when you have essentially no other options. There are many extreme characters that are better than most of the C tier characters, and in most cases there are extreme characters that can fit on whatever specific team you're talking about that are a much better option than these C tier characters. These are characters that unfortunately are not quite bad enough to get balance changes like the D tier characters, so they are used very, very sporadically, but they're not good characters, so you won't see them very often at all. So let's move into the B tier. B tier units are filler units, but not quality filler units. So generally your quality filler units will be in the A and the S tier. The B tier units are if you just don't have anyone for whatever specific team you're trying to fill out, you need that one last slot, and your only option is someone that is B tier or below, you will pick that B tier character. These characters generally don't have very good stats overall, and their kits are starting to show some wear and tear, as in most cases they are considerably older kits that don't have a lot of the new bells and whistles that you'll see in some newer characters. Let's move into the A tier. A tier characters are reasonably good filler units, but not as high quality as S tier. Generally, they don't have the damage output or defensive capabilities of most of your S tier characters, and their kits are not always that great. One exception being the newest character that's been added to this list, or the first character that is new being added to this list in the A tier. You'll see the Titans Yamcha, Baseball Yamcha. His kit is absolutely fantastic. The only real reason that he's so low on the list is because his overall stat spread is absolutely horrible. To say it's subpar would be underselling it for sure, but his abilities are fantastic, especially his green card. The only issue with his green card is everyone knows it's fantastic, and people in most cases, if they're a skilled player, will not be dumb enough to shoot any key blasts or key arts cards specifically at your Yamcha so he can smack it out of the park. It just doesn't happen very often. So let's move into the S tier. S tier characters are quality filler units, but generally not your first option. This isn't necessarily because their damage is bad or their defense is bad, but they're just all around not as well rounded as some of the S plus tier characters. A great example of this is the Red Gogeta. The Red Super Gogeta has moved down from the S plus tier in recent tier lists down to the S tier. That's because his damage is still okay, but his defensive capabilities are absolutely horrible, and he's a huge liability on most teams. And on the offensive side, he doesn't pump out as much damage as a lot of the super high-end beat sticks that are in the game right now, and that's why he's moved down. Another character of note is the Great Saiyan. He actually has great damage potential, and he is the highest ranked Legends Road character in the game right now. He's a fantastic unit. He's coming up just short of that S plus tier. So let's move into the S plus tier and talk about those units. So S plus tier units are the units that you're going to be building your team with. You have the Z tier units that are the most powerful units in the game, and those are the characters that you base your team on. But then once you have that Z tier unit that you're basing your team on, you generally want to build around that with S plus tier characters. These are high quality units that that don't necessarily have the damage potential of the Z tier units, but they do have great supportive kits in most cases. But then you also have the opposite, where many of the S plus tier characters that don't have absolutely amazing kits do have a ton of damage potential, they're just lacking in utility. A great example of that is the Super Saiyan Goku GT, who has a ton of damage potential. He just doesn't have a lot of utility in his kit. His one main job is just to sit there and just pump out damage, which can be good by itself, but you have to make sure that you're bringing in other characters to fill out those utility and defensive needs, which is why he's not a Z tier character. So let's move into the Z tier. Okay, one thing I'd like to note about the Z tier before we move into our 7th place character is these characters are not necessarily super close in their power potential or their relevance to each team. So say the character in the 7th position isn't as close to the character in the 6th position as the character in the 2nd and 3rd position may be. All we're showing here is that these Z tier characters are all of higher value than the S plus tier characters. So if you see a character in the 6th or 7th slot and you're like, oh, they're not anywhere near as good as that one that's in the 5th or 4th, that's probably true, but they do generally bring more value than all the characters you see in the S plus tier. And as we stated before, those are arbitrarily placed in that tier. They're all close enough in power level and value that that's where they should be. If there's a character that's slightly better than all those characters, they're moved into the Z tier. So with that being said, let's start with number 7. The new green legendary Super Saiyan Burly. He just came out, so he may get some small movements in the very near future, but in the first 48 hours of playing with him, or 36 hours, he is an absolutely awesome defensive unit. In many cases, if he's not at type disadvantage, he can actually take a Rising Rush and not die, assuming that he has close to full health. He also has an amazing green card that can push the opponent back. He can stop a combo mid-combo, so he has a cover change that if your opponent is attacking you and you cover change into this Broly, he's going to get a 50% damage reduction, and if they happen to be using a Strike Arts card at the time, it's going to stop that combo, push the opponent back, and allow you to change up the momentum, because when that happens, it's also going to allow you to reduce their key recovery by 80%, so you can really mess with the momentum of the match, and that makes him very powerful because the teams that he was on before didn't have a ton of defensive options, and he's an absolutely amazing defensive unit, which really elevates him above the S plus tier units where he would normally sit if he didn't have that very valuable position with no competition. One small drawback about this character that I do want to mention is that the green card does not stop the Rising Rush, so if you're trying to use your green card with this Broly to stop a Rising Rush, that's a bad idea. He's going to get crushed. So let's go ahead and move on to number 6, Zamasu. He's been around for a while now, and he's still sitting in the Z tier. He's extremely tanky. He can heal your entire team with his main ability. He can tank a Rising Rush and then heal back up. He has decent damage potential against Hybrid Saiyans and Saiyans. Hybrid Saiyans are not super common in the meta right now, but there are 3 of them or so that are used fairly often, and there are tons of Saiyans still in the meta, so he definitely has lots of damage potential options, and he sits on the most powerful team in the game right now, Regeneration. He makes them even more tanky overall because of the things that I just mentioned, the fact that he can heal the entire team, and it is nice that with his main ability, he can cancel attribute downgrades and abnormal conditions, which depending on your opponent may or may not be a big issue. Either way, it's the cherry on top for what has been for a very long time a great character that sits on an amazing team. So let's move on to number 5. The new Broly movie Gogeta. This is a character that has an absolutely insane damage potential and has some of the best key recovery in the game and key mechanics in general. The problem is he doesn't have a lot of defense. If he had any way to really deal with the enemy onslaught and be a tanky unit, he would probably be one of the top 3 best characters in the game. The issue right now is he's fairly flimsy, but he can transform and then use his transform main ability to heal. So he does have one option to deal with a lot of damage incoming that he can't normally deal with in any other situation. With that being said, he can start a combo when he doesn't have full ki, because as he uses his vanishing step, he does get 20 ki back for that. There are other cases where he can get ki back, and his special move does an absolute ton of damage, especially if he's been on the field for a while. So he is a character that can delete an opponent very quickly. You just have to be very careful when using him to not take too much damage, because he can go down in the blink of an eye. So let's move on to number 4, Ribrienne, the absolute monster anchor unit of the female warrior team. You'll notice there are quite a few female warrior characters that didn't really fall down the list in the last month or so, simply because this character has taken the female warrior team that was starting to really fall off and brought it back into competitive levels in the meta. She is an absolute monster if you put her on the female warrior team and both of your other female warrior characters die. When she's an anchor, she pumps out so much damage that she can absolutely delete most characters that don't have a full type advantage in a single combo. You have to be very, very careful not to let her just run wild once you've killed her first 2 opponents, because she can delete your team very quickly at that point. She also has a main ability that allows you to lock in your opponent so they can't switch out. So if you get in a situation where you think you have one specific character that you need to take out and your rebrand can finish the rest of the team off, what you do is you lock them in with that main ability, she crushes them, and you keep rolling. The only real issue with Rebrand is the fact that she doesn't really have any type of utility outside of just doing damage and locking an opponent in. She doesn't have any defensive utility, she doesn't have a lot of healing utility, so if you're gonna have her on your team, you have to make sure that you're making up for that with your other team members. Luckily, the female warrior team does have many options for this, especially the Green Mai, so just keep that in mind and let's move on to number 3. Father-son Kamehameha Gohan. The Super Saiyan 2 Gohan is an absolute insane damage dealer. Beyond that, he does have cover damage reduction, which is very nice. It's a defensive addition to a very offensive unit. He also can heal himself with his main ability, and he takes less damage from regeneration units. Beyond that, he has an Ultimate Arts card, which is a legendary finish and is essentially a second Rising Rush outside of your normal Rising Rush, because in most cases it will one-shot an opponent. There are some exceptions, but generally it's going to finish whoever you're hitting with it off. Outside of that, he's an absolutely insane anchor unit, as you get increased ki and damage as your allies die. By the time you get to the end of the battle, if both your allies are dead, you still have your Gohan, and your opponent has 2 or fewer characters left, and you haven't used your Ultimate Arts card with this character, you still have a very reasonable fighting chance of winning. So overall, he is a well-rounded character. He could be a little more defensive, and he doesn't have a lot of entangling support abilities like the characters we're about to look at do, but overall, he's absolutely fantastic. Let's move on to number 2. Super Saiyan Broly. He's been sitting near the top or at the top of this tier list for a very long time, and it doesn't seem like he's going to be going away anytime in the near future. While he is going to be susceptible to power creep and there will be characters that pass him, his kit is amazing and will be for a very long time. He has the ability to get rid of type disadvantage the first few times that he comes into the actual battle. He has the ability to remove a character from battle if he doesn't want to fight that character with his green card. He can transform and get health back. Once he transforms, he increases his damage and defenses. He does a ton of damage with his blast, and he has blast armor when he's using his strike arts card. Beyond that, he has an ultimate arts card that does a ton of damage, and the first few times he comes into battle, he also gets an increased arts card draw speed, so he can create very long combos, which makes him a very formidable opponent. With all that being said, there is a better character, so let's move on to number 1. Perfect Cell. He has amazing damage potential. He directly counters the second best character in the game because of his color, the Broly. With that being said, he has an ultimate arts card that can delete many characters. He has a cover rescue just like the green instant transmission Goku, so he has a way for you to completely negate a Rising Rush, and when he enters the battlefield, he seals one of your opponent's cards, which can be extremely frustrating and really reduce their options for attacking you back once you've finished your combo. Also, he gets an increase to damage and he regenerates his own health over time, making him even more tanky than he currently is. And beyond all that, he is the centerpiece for the most powerful team in the game right now, Regeneration. So overall, he's a fantastic character that sits on the best team, and while you can put him on other teams, he absolutely shines on that Regeneration team and makes them nearly unbeatable when comboed with Masu. So this is where our Sparking tier list sets. Let me know what you guys think. Who do you think should be moved around? Who do you think needs to be completely removed out of the Z tier? Who needs to be added? Who is just in the completely wrong spot? Let me know down below and let's talk about it. And if you guys like this content, make sure to like and subscribe, and I'll see you guys in the next video.